There is a silence that arrives when the empath finally steps back. It is not a dramatic storm, nor the noise of vengeance. It is a sacred withdrawal, a stillness that trembles like the moment before dawn, when even the air seems unsure of what is to come. In that quiet, the narcissist begins to feel the terror of their own shadow. They do not understand at first what has happened. They only know that something luminous has vanished from their world, something that reflected them back to themselves. The empath's light, once a mirror of their illusion, has been taken away, and what remains is the cold echo of their own emptiness. You see, relationships are rarely between two conscious beings. Most people do not meet each other, their wounds do. The empath's wound is the ancient yearning to heal, to give, to redeem what feels broken in themselves through the other. The narcissist's wound is the abyss of inner fragmentation, the desperate need to be adored, not for who they are, but for the image they wear. Together, they form a psychological equation of shadow and reflection, of the healer and the hollow. They orbit one another like the moon and the night, the empath illuminating what the narcissist refuses to see. But when the light withdraws, the truth is revealed. The moon turns its face, and darkness must finally behold itself. In the language of the psyche, the empath and the narcissist are not random encounters, they are archetypal forces meeting in the theater of the soul. The empath represents the anima mundi, the world soul, the great compassionate current that seeks unity and healing. The narcissist embodies the false self, that grand illusion erected to protect the fragile child within. Their meeting is not accidental. It is a symbolic drama through which both are invited toward individuation, the process by which the unconscious is made conscious and the self becomes whole. Yet few accept the invitation. The empath, blinded by compassion, often confuses healing with self-sacrifice. They believe that by pouring more light into the darkness will learn to shine. But darkness does not learn from light, it learns from the absence of it. Only when the mirror no longer reflects does the narcissist confront the void that has always been theirs to face. And only when the empath ceases to save does their own wound of worthlessness rise into view. So when the empath withdraws, it is not an act of cruelty. It is a cosmic necessity. The psyche demands balance. Every projection must be returned to its owner. The narcissist, you see, cannot love another because they have never met themselves. Their love is performance, their intimacy a mask. They are like an actor who never leaves the stage, terrified of the silence backstage, where no applause can reach, but the empath, through their luminous presence, becomes that audience, that endless applause. They confirm the narcissist's false identity by mirroring it with attention and empathy. The narcissist does not feed on cruelty. They feed on reflection. They exist only as long as someone sees them, or rather, sees the mask they present, and the empath unconsciously finds meaning in being that mirror. They say, I see your pain, I see your hidden child. Let me hold it. But they do not realize that they are holding their own disowned child projected into the other. The wound of the empath is not weakness. It is ancient responsibility. Many empaths were born in homes where they had to sense the moods of others to survive. They became healers by necessity, not by calling. Their light is a survival mechanism, a sensitivity developed to navigate chaos. Thus, when they meet the narcissist, they feel familiarity. I know this energy. They think it feels like home, and indeed, it is the psychological home of enmeshment, of being seen only when giving, loved only when saving. The soul, however, does not repeat patterns for pleasure. It repeats them for revelation. When the empath finally awakens, it is not through insight, but through exhaustion. They give until their energy becomes translucent, until even their dreams feel drained. They start to sense that something is devouring them, something invisible yet insatiable. They feel anxiety for no reason, guilt for resting, fear for speaking truth. That is when the light begins to flicker. The psyche whispers, withdraw, go inward, remember who the light belongs to. Withdrawal is the sacred act of reclaiming projection. The empath, for the first time, ceases to be a source and becomes a seeker. They no longer feed the hungry ghost of another's ego. They turn to their own emptiness, and in that turning, they meet what they had long denied their own narcissist. The part of them that also craved to be needed, adored, and indispensable. The empath discovers that they, too, wore a mask, the mask of the Savior. And only by removing it can they step into true compassion, which does not rescue but respects. Meanwhile, the narcissist, now deprived of the mirror, faces what they have always feared. The absence of reflection. No one is there to affirm their importance, no one to absorb their chaos. The silence becomes unbearable. They may rage, blame, manipulate, seek new mirrors, but none shine as before. For the empath's light was not ordinary. It carried soul. The narcissist may move from one admirer to another, but each encounter feels increasingly hollow, because what they lost was not a person, it was a connection to life itself through that person's empathy. And when that life current is gone, they are left with a barren echo of their own unintegrated self. It is then that the dark night of the soul begins, not for the empath, but for the narcissist. The ancient mystics called it kenosis, the emptying. It is the stage where the false self collapses under the weight of its own illusion. If the narcissist can endure the loneliness, if they can resist the urge to find another mirror and instead face the void, transformation becomes possible. They might, for the first time, feel pain not as an injury, but as a message. The pain says, you are not what you pretend to be. This is the beginning of individuation. the birth of the authentic self from the ruins of the persona. But few narcissists make it that far. Most flee back into performance. They collect new empaths, new stages, new applause, never realizing that every audience leaves them emptier, yet some through divine paradox. Awaken precisely because the empaths withdrew. The absence becomes the teacher. In losing the light, they learn to seek their own. Such a moment, if it comes, is sacred. It is when the mask falls and the face of the soul trembles beneath it. As for the empath, their withdrawal marks the beginning of sovereignty. They learn that love without boundaries is not love, but martyrdom. They learn that compassion without wisdom breeds codependency. They learn that to truly heal the world, they must first inhabit themselves. Their journey inward leads them through the shadow, the guilt of saying no, the fear of being called selfish, the grief of lost connection. But as they descend, they find something astonishing. Their light no longer flickers. It grows denser, clearer, more radiant, not because it is being used to illuminate others, but because it now burns from within. In Jungian language, this is the integration of the self, the union of opposites, the reconciliation of shadow and persona. The empath who once existed for others now meets their own divine center. They realize that empathy is not infinite energy to be distributed, but sacred fire to be guarded. They become alchemists of feeling, discerning when to give and when to withdraw, when to shine and when to rest. Their love becomes solar, not lunar, self-sustaining, radiant from within. And so, paradoxically, by withdrawing their light, they illuminate more truth than they ever did by giving it away. For their absence becomes the mirror in which the narcissist must finally meet themselves. You may have noticed this in your own life. When you step back from someone who feeds on your energy, they suddenly seem lost. They accuse, guilt, or manipulate, trying to pull you back into orbit. But remember that reaction is not proof of love, it is proof of dependence. Love rejoices in your freedom. Only the shadow panics at your absence. The world is full of empaths who mistake enslavement for service. They walk carrying others' burdens, unaware that their own soul is bending. To such souls, I say, your withdrawal is not abandonment, it is initiation. It is how the psyche teaches you that your light was never meant to be currency. You are not a battery for the broken egos of others. You are a living temple of consciousness. And sometimes the most compassionate act is to close the temple doors until you can feel the presence of your own divinity again. There is no true love without individuation. To love consciously, one must meet one's own darkness. Otherwise, love becomes projection, a mirror of wounds. The empath's task, therefore, is not to heal the narcissist, but to integrate the part of themselves that seeks to be loved through healing. Only then can they meet others from wholeness. Note hunger. When both individuals begin this process, When the empath learns boundaries and the narcissist confronts the void, something miraculous occurs. The energy that once oscillated between giver and taker becomes balanced. The empaths no longer bleeds light, they radiate it. The narcissist no longer steals reflection. They create their own. That is the possibility hidden in the pain, the alchemical gold born from emotional transmutation. And yet, I must tell you this truth. Very few ever reach that gold. Most remain in the cycle, the empath drawn to those who need saving, the narcissist hunting for those who will see them. The universe repeats this pattern not to punish, but to awaken. Each repetition tightens the circle until one day the soul cries out, enough. That cry is the birth of awareness, the moment the empath withdraws their light and turns inward to face the God within. When the light retreats, a strange phenomenon unfolds in the unconscious of both souls. The empath feels a deep tremor, as if the ground beneath their compassion begins to shift. The narcissist, deprived of the mirror, descends into confusion. What once reflected them has gone opaque, and in this opaque silence, the shadow rises like fog from the marshes of the psyche. In dreams, this stage often takes the form of a labyrinth. The empath dreams of walking through endless corridors, searching for a door that keeps vanishing. They feel pursued by figures who beg for light, who cling to their hands with ghostly desperation. It is not the narcissist they are seeing. It is their own unhealed archetype of the savior. The unconscious paints images to show what the ego cannot yet admit, that the desire to rescue another was a secret prayer to be rescued oneself. Meanwhile, the narcissist dreams differently. Their dreams are filled with mirrors that crack when they approach. They may see themselves as kings abandoned in ruined castles, or as actors performing to empty seats. In these images, the self tries to communicate what the persona resists. You are alone not because the world has betrayed you, but because you have betrayed your own inner truth. Every mirror shattered is a call to authenticity. But the narcissist's ego, built upon admiration, cannot bear to look into nothingness, so they awaken angry, seeking new reflections, unaware that the only mirror capable of healing them now lies within. The psyche communicates in symbols because the conscious mind is too fragile for direct confrontation. The empath's dream of vanishing doors whispers, "You have given your keys to others." The narcissist's broken mirrors say, "You are addicted to being seen, but you have never seen yourself." Both are being led toward the same alchemical crucible where illusion must burn before gold can emerge. This stage, this dark mirror, is one of death and rebirth. It is the crucifixion of the image, the disintegration of what was false. When I spoke of individuation, I did not speak of comfort. The journey toward wholeness is not the cultivation of light. It is the descent into the valley of shadow, where light is born from confrontation. The empath, as they withdraw, begins to feel guilt like a serpent coiling around the heart. The narcissist feels abandonment like a blade in the chest. Yet, both sensations are sacred signals. They announce the death of the false bond. You must understand, love that binds through pain is not love. It is possession. The empath thought they were healing the narcissist, but they were, in truth, feeding the illusion that love can redeem what refuses to awaken. The narcissist thought they were loved for their essence, but they were adored for their image. The divine plan hides itself even in tragedy. By losing the other, both are forced to meet their own God and their own demon. In this confrontation, archetypes awaken. The empath, having played the role of the mother, begins to sense the rise of the warrior, a force within that demands boundaries, clarity, sovereignty. The narcissist, having played the king without a kingdom, faces the wounded child, trembling beneath the throne. The mother withdraws her nurturing light. The false king is left in the cold to meet the truth of his own dependence. It is a sacred inversion of power. The empath learns strength through stillness, and the narcissist learns humility through loss. This is why many relationships that begin as cosmic connections end as initiations into solitude. What you called soulmate was often the meeting of your shadow. The empath saw divinity in the narcissist because the narcissist reflected the empath's unclaimed confidence and power. The narcissist adored the empath because the empath mirrored the tenderness they had exiled from their own heart. The relationship was the temple in which the unconscious sought to heal its division, but temples, too, must one day be left behind. Withdrawal, therefore, is not rejection. It is transcendence. When the empath no longer needs to rescue, they step beyond duality. Their light becomes conscious. It no longer burns as reaction, but radiates as being. They begin to understand what I meant when I wrote. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The empath has always imagined light. Now they embody it. Their empathy ceases to be emotion and becomes awareness. The narcissist, if they endure the darkness, will experience something equally profound. They will learn that identity built on validation is a fragile edifice. They will realize that admiration is not intimacy and control is not connection. If they can suffer long enough without seeking new supply, they may discover the inner wellspring of authenticity. That moment rare, painful, transformative, is the birth of the soul. For the first time, they no longer need to be seen, they need to be real. But the road to that revelation is steep. Without the empath's light, the narcissist's psyche becomes haunted. They feel the presence of their own shadow, everywhere loneliness, self-contempt, despair. Some will flee, others will rage, but a few, those who carry a spark of self-awareness, will stay. They will watch the shadow instead of fighting it. They will begin to notice that beneath their grandiosity lies not power, but fear, and within that fear, is the child who was never allowed to be seen without a mask. The narcissist's healing begins the moment they stop performing for an imaginary audience and allow themselves to grieve. Yes, grief, the great unacknowledged medicine of our age, for both empath and narcissist. The grief is the same. The mourning of illusion. The empath grieves the fantasy of saving others. The narcissist grieves the fantasy of being worshipped. Through tears, both discover humility, the sacred ground upon which true selfhood can stand. I once wrote that every psychological problem is a spiritual problem, and every spiritual awakening is preceded by chaos. This is that chaos. The empath may wander in confusion, unsure who they are without someone to heal. They may mistake stillness for emptiness, forgetting that silence is the language of the self. The narcissist may spiral into despair, unable to find meaning when the applause stops. Yet in that despair, the first whisper of the divine can be heard. The dream symbolism shifts as healing begins. The empath starts to dream of water, clear rivers, rain, oceans without storms. Water symbolizes the return of emotion to flow, no longer blocked by others' pain. The narcissist dreams of fire, sometimes destructive, sometimes illuminating. Fire is the self's attempt to burn away falseness. Both elements, water and fire, represent the alchemical process of transformation, dissolution, and purification. When the empath reclaims their light, they are no longer defined by what they give, but by what they are. Their aura changes. They move through life not as saviors, but as creators. They no longer absorb energy, they transmute it. They can walk into darkness without being consumed, because they now understand that darkness is not evil, it is potential waiting for awareness. Their empathy becomes a gift, not a curse. And when such a healed empath crosses paths again with the one who once drained them, something remarkable happens. The energy no longer entangles the narcissist, expecting to see the old mirror, instead encounters transparency. Their manipulation no longer finds purchase. Their projection falls flat. It is as though the empath has become invisible to the old dynamic. This is not indifference. It is transcendence. They have outgrown the frequency of bondage. The narcissist, sensing this, may feel both attraction and terror. The new light is pure, unmirrored, unyielding. It invites authenticity, but forbids illusion. To stand before such a person is to stand before truth itself. Some will flee again into old patterns. Others will bow inwardly and begin their own journey toward wholeness. The seed planted by the empath's withdrawal may bloom years later in silence. The psyche never wastes pain. It transforms it into revelation in its own time. And you, the listener, if you recognize yourself in this tale, know this. What you called rejection was protection. The universe removes what keeps you from seeing your own radiance. Every withdrawal is a rite of passage. Every silence is a sacred mirror. The darkness you fear to face is the doorway to your own divine self. When the empath withdraws, the entire psychic field between them collapses like a dying star. And yet from that implosion, something new is born. The unconscious begins its alchemy. Both are summoned inward to a confrontation with what they once projected outward. It is the sacred stage of transformation that I called conjunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites. What was once externalized as you becomes internalized as me. The empath's longing to heal the other becomes the recognition of their own unhealed inner child. The narcissist's hunger to be adored becomes the recognition of their own unloved heart. You see, the psyche seeks wholeness, not comfort. It conspires through suffering, through relationships that wound, to awaken us from the trance of our roles. Every soul you meet in life is a mirror reflecting a hidden aspect of yourself. The empath and the narcissist are not enemies. They are instruments in each other's individuation. Through the friction of their connection, the self reveals its concealed geometry, the way light and shadow need one another to exist. For the empath, integration begins the moment they realize that compassion without discernment is not virtue, but avoidance. They begin to feel the raw anger they had buried beneath kindness. Anger is not evil. It is the fire that guards the temple of the soul. It says, you are crossing a boundary that protects something sacred. Many empaths were taught that anger destroys love. But in truth, anger purified by awareness becomes the guardian of authenticity. When they allow that fire to live again, they stop being prey to emotional vampires. Their light no longer leaks from unguarded cracks. It becomes focused, radiant, so verein. The narcissist's path of integration is equally fierce. When the mirror breaks, they are forced to face the horror of the unreflected self. Beneath their mask lies the orphaned psyche, the part abandoned in childhood, when love became conditional. The narcissist's grandiosity was never arrogance. It was camouflage for unbearable shame. The tragedy is that their performance was a plea. Will you love me even when I am not magnificent? When the empath's light disappears, the performance loses its stage. That collapse is the mercy of fate, because only in that devastation can the true self emerge. Both must descend into what I have often called the night sea journey, the passage through inner darkness. It is the same archetypal journey that heroes undertake in myth. The empath must dive into the waters of their neglected individuality. The narcissist must walk through the fire of their denied vulnerability. Neither journey is linear, and both are fraught with temptation. The empath will be tempted to turn back, to rekindle the bond, to heal again. The narcissist will be tempted to seek a new source of light, another empath to feed upon. But if they endure, if they hold the silence long enough, something begins to transmute within. Symbols arise. For the empath, dreams shift from drowning to breathing underwater. The ocean no longer feels like suffocation, but like home. They discover that emotion is not an enemy, but a current of truth. For the narcissist, dreams of broken mirrors give way to one mirror whole, simple, undistorted. In that mirror, they see not a god or a victim, but a human being. And in that moment of humility, the self smiles from behind the eyes. To withdraw light is not to withhold love. It is to return love to its rightful place within the self. The empath begins to understand that they were never meant to be a sun for another's universe. Every soul carries its own sun, its own center of consciousness. When the empath stops radiating compulsively, they begin to orbit their own core. This is individuation in its purest form, becoming a circle complete within itself, no longer seeking completion through another. In this stage, solitude becomes revelation. What once felt like loneliness begins to feel like space. Silence, once unbearable, turns lumineux. The empath discovers the voice of their inner guide, the wise old man or woman archetype, the Senex of the soul who whispers, "You are not here to fix, you are here to be." That whisper is the first note of true wisdom. The narcissist, if they reach that threshold, encounters the same archetype in different guise. They meet the inner guide as a wounded teacher who says, "You do not need to be worshipped, you need to be real." This confrontation between false self and true self is brutal. The ego must die. It does not die quietly. It fights, bargains, cries, but the psyche is relentless in its mercy. It will dismantle every illusion until what remains is essence pure, naked consciousness. And then the alchemy begins to reverse. The empath, once water, learns to wield fire. The narcissist, once fire, learns the grace of water. The empath's compassion gains structure. The narcissist's will gains softness. Opposites integrate, masculine and feminine, giving and receiving, strength and sensitivity, all dance within the same soul. This is the mystical marriage, the inner union that all outer relationships only mirror imperfectly. The world begins to change when this inner union occurs. The empath no longer attracts predators because their vibration no longer calls them. They do not resonate with lack. They have learned that love is not found through sacrifice, but through presence. The narcissist, if they awaken, ceases to manipulate, because they no longer need to control to exist. They discover the quiet dignity of being themselves without applause. The psyche celebrates such integration through symbols of gold, light, and rebirth. The alchemists call it the lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone. But this stone was never material. It is the solid core of consciousness forged by the marriage of opposites. When the empath integrates their shadow and the narcissist integrates their wound, both become gold, radiant and incorruptible. At this stage, one may dream of dawn after endless night, or of a garden blooming in the ashes of a fire. These dreams are not fantasies. They are psychic confirmations. They tell you that energy, once trapped in projection, has returned home. The light that once blinded others now illuminates within. You become both the lamp and the flame, both the seer and the seen. Do not imagine, however, that integration makes you invulnerable. The psyche is not a fortress but a river. Shadows will return. Patterns will tempt you. Illusions will whisper again. But now you will meet them differently, not with fear, but with recognition. You will say, "Ah, here is my old friend, the shadow. Let us talk." And in that conversation, no darkness can dominate you, for you have befriended it. Thus, when the empath withdraws their light, the world does not end. It begins. Their light, once externalized, returns to the inner kingdom. They stop being the moon reflecting others' suns and become the dawn of their own consciousness. And though the narcissist may wander in darkness, that darkness is not punishment. It is invitation. Every soul, no matter how lost, is guided by the self toward wholeness. The empath's withdrawal is therefore an act of grace in disguise. It is how the universe restores equilibrium. It is how the soul remembers that love, in its truest form, liberates rather than binds. And so, when both have descended into the underworld of their own psyche and emerged again different, tempered, luminous, there arises a new awareness, one that transcends the polarity that once defined them. The empath, now self-contained, no longer glows in response to need. They radiate as an act of being. The narcissist, stripped of illusion, no longer hunts for light to steal. They begin to kindle their own small flame. In the alchemical text, this is the rubedo, the reddening, the stage where the soul, having endured dissolution and purification, now incarnates its gold into the world. You see, every time the empath withdraws their light, they enact on a human scale what the cosmos performs in every cycle. The sun must set for the stars to appear. Darkness is not the enemy of light. It is the canvas upon which light reveals its meaning. The narcissist's suffering, though cruelly earned, is the necessary night in which they might, if they choose, discover the true dawn. The empath too has changed. Their compassion, once diffused and porous, now becomes like crystal clear, firm and strong. They no longer confuse love with depletion. Their sensitivity remains, but it is anchored in discernment. They feel everything, yet they are not enslaved by what they feel. They can witness another's pain without drowning in it. They can walk among the broken without breaking, for their empathy has matured into wisdom, and wisdom is love with boundaries. In this transformation, the empath becomes something of a healer in the Jungian sense, not by curing others, but by becoming a living symbol of integration. Their presence itself becomes therapeutic. When they speak from wholeness. When they love, They love from fullness. They no longer give to be loved. They give because they are love. Their energy no longer oscillates between savior and victim. It flows steadily, quietly, as a river that nourishes without losing itself. The narcissist, if they have survived the confrontation with their own emptiness, emerges humbled. They begin to see that what they called strength was armor, and what they called power was control. True strength, they realize, lies in vulnerability, in the courage to be seen as imperfect. True power lies in authenticity, the willingness to live without the mask. For the first time, they can look into another's eyes and see not a mirror, but a soul. This is redemption, not in a moral sense, but in a psychological one. The shadow, once split and denied, has been integrated. The false self has died, and from its ashes rises the authentic being. It does not happen quickly. The psyche resists resurrection. It trembles, collapses, rebuilds, but each small moment of honesty is a resurrection. Each act of humility is a sunrise. There is a deeper mystery here, one that transcends individual healing. When the empath withdraws their light and the narcissist faces darkness, the event does not only occur between two people, it reverberates through the collective unconscious. It is an archetypal drama that every soul plays at some point in its evolution. Humanity itself oscillates between empathy and narcissism, between self-sacrifice and self-obsession, between losing itself in others and losing others in itself. The healing of one such pair sends ripples into the great sea of the collective psyche, softening its polarity, teaching the whole to remember balance. We are living in an age of mirrors, technology, social validation, endless reflection. It all feeds the archetype of the narcissist, the hunger to be seen. Yet beneath it, the empath archetype grows weary, drained by the ceaseless giving, the endless reflection of pain. The world cries out for equilibrium, and so when an individual empath withdraws, when they reclaim their energy, they are not merely healing themselves, they are rebalancing the collective soul. The narcissist, in their fall, shows us the cost of disconnection. The empath, in their rise, shows us the path of reconnection. The two are not enemies, but sacred participants in humanity's larger alchemical process. The shadow of one redeems the excess of the other. It is the same dance that exists in nature, the tides between night and day, expansion and contraction, ego and soul. If you, listener, find yourself in this story, know that none of it was meaningless. The pain, the confusion, the heartbreak, it was initiation. Every tear you shed for someone who could not love you was holy water cleansing your vision. Every boundary you finally drew was a sword forged in your own awakening. You did not lose them. You found yourself. When you reach the point where your light is no longer a reaction but a presence, you become untouchable, not in arrogance, but in serenity. Nothing can steal what you no longer give away unconsciously. You have learned the highest form of compassion, to love without losing yourself, to give without forgetting your source. You have become the embodiment of the self, the divine center that contains all opposites. And if you are the one who once lived in the darkness, know that it is not too late. The absence of light is not eternal exile. It is sacred invitation. The darkness you feel now is the womb of the self, preparing to birth your authenticity. When you stop seeking reflection and begin to listen to the silence, the true voice within will speak. It will not flatter you. It will free you. That is the ultimate truth of this dynamic. Both were teachers disguised as torment. The empath taught the narcissist that love cannot be possessed. The narcissist taught the empath that love cannot be performed. Together they created the fire through which both could be reborn. In the end, love itself remains no longer sentimental, no longer romanticized, but sacred and impersonal. It is not I love you or you love me. It is love moves through us. It is the awareness that the light and the darkness are not enemies but collaborators in creation. And so, when the empath withdraws their light, the narcissist faces darkness alone, but not forever. For in that darkness, if they are brave, they will find the same source the empath returned to, the same divine fire that burned in the healer's heart burns also in the wounded. The journey was never about saving or being saved. It was about remembering that both are expressions of one eternal psyche yearning to know itself. The cycle ends where it began, in silence. But this time, the silence is not empty. It hums with presence. The empath sits in it without guilt. The narcissist, if they have awakened, kneels in it without fear. Both have met the self, and in that meeting, the ancient polarity dissolves. What remains is consciousness vast, luminous, whole, and from that stillness, light emerges again. Not the desperate light that seeks an audience, but the quiet radiance of awareness itself, the kind that neither shines nor hides, it simply is. That is the end of the journey. Not escape, not victory. Integration. When the empath withdraws their light, the narcissist faces darkness alone, and from that darkness, both learn at last that light was never meant to be borrowed. It was meant to be found